The defenders of Kyiv, in the waning days of February 2022, as winter's grip still held Kyiv in its icy embrace, Alexei Petrov found himself staring out the window of his modest apartment in the historic Podil district. The Dnipro River shimmered below under a pale sun, its frozen surface fractured like glass. The city moved in uneasy rhythm, buses ran, children trudged to school, and the cafés still served coffee, but every conversation carried an undertone of dread. At 32, Alexei was a software engineer, his life until then defined by logic, code, and the hum of servers. His wife Lena and their 4-year-old daughter Sofia were his world, laughter around a kitchen table, bedtime stories, the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings. But now even those small joys were shadowed by fear. Lena had been packing for days. "We should go to Lviv," she'd urged, her voice trembling as she folded Sofia's clothes into a duffel bag. "The news, it's getting worse." Alexei had kissed her forehead, trying to steady her. "Not yet. This is our home. If we all run, who fights?" He wasn't a soldier, and he knew it. His hands were soft, used to keyboards, not rifles. But something in him, maybe pride, maybe defiance, refused to yield. That night, after putting Sofia to bed, he scrolled through his phone. Satellite images of Russian armor massing at the border, videos of troop trains, speculation, panic. The screen's blue light flickered over his face like the reflection of distant flames. Across the river, in the Obolin district, Maria Kuznetsova hurried home from her job at a local primary school. 28 years old, kind-eyed and quick-witted, she'd always believed teaching was her calling. Her students adored her. Her classroom walls were lined with Ukrainian folk art and hand-drawn maps. But that day the children had asked different questions. "Miss Maria, are the Russians coming?" She'd forced a smile. "No one knows, my dear, but whatever happens, we'll take care of each other." Still, her heart had pounded all afternoon. The city felt taut, stretched to a breaking point. On the way home, her phone buzzed with messages, rumors, warnings, disbelief. She made vareniki for dinner, but could barely eat. The radio murmured Zelensky's voice. "We must stay calm. We must stay strong." She nodded to herself in the dim kitchen light. "Then I'll stay," she whispered, "and I'll help." February 24, the first night at 4:30 a.m., Kyiv erupted. Missiles streaked across the pre-dawn sky like falling stars turned malevolent. Explosions rolled through the air, rattling windows and hearts alike. Alexei awoke to Sofia's cries and Lena's shaking hands. The apartment trembled, dust drifted from the ceiling. He ran to the window. On the horizon, orange plumes bloomed. Hostomel Airport was under assault. The impossible had become reality. Lena's voice broke through the chaos. "Alexei, please, come to us in Lviv, please." He hesitated only a moment. "I can't, I have to help here." He threw on layers of clothing, grabbed a flashlight, and kissed Sofia's hair one last time. "Papa will protect you," he said, though his throat burned with fear. Outside, Kyiv was alive with motion, cars fleeing west, sirens wailing, neighbors shouting names through the dark. At the Territorial Defense Recruitment Post, a crowd had already formed, faces lit by cold street lamps. Some held passports, others hunting rifles or nothing but determination. An officer barked, "Sign up. You'll get weapons soon." When his turn came, Alexei's hand trembled slightly as he wrote his name. A programmer yesterday, a soldier today. Meanwhile, Maria huddled with neighbors in her building's basement. The air was damp, the walls vibrating from distant impacts. Rumors spread like wildfire, Russian paratroopers landing in Obolin, tanks crossing from Belarus. Someone said saboteurs were already in the city, disguised as Ukrainian soldiers. When the shelling paused, Maria climbed to the street. Smoke drifted over rooftops. A grocery store's glass windows were shattered. In the distance, gunfire popped like firecrackers. She joined others at the community center, stacking sandbags, filling bottles with gasoline, her hands strung from the cold. "We'll need these," a man said, nodding at the makeshift Molotovs. Maria looked around at the people, teachers, plumbers, students, pensioners, all transformed. "We'll fight," she murmured, "for our homes." February 25-27, the battle for the city. By the next day, Kyiv had changed. The cafes were shuttered, streets empty except for barricades of tires, sandbags, and overturned buses. The city's pulse was survival. Alexei's unit, a ragtag mix of volunteers and a few veterans, was sent north toward the suburbs. They moved cautiously, rifles clutched, adrenaline replacing sleep. Smoke hung heavy over Hostomel, where Ukrainian defenders still fought to reclaim the airfield. From a muddy ditch, Alexei watched Ukrainian jets slice through the sky, one pursued by a Russian fighter. The two danced in a deadly spiral until one exploded in a flash of orange. "Hero down," murmured his commander, removing his helmet briefly. The next hours blurred, gunfire, orders shouted, the acrid stench of gunpowder. At a checkpoint, they intercepted a group of Russian saboteurs disguised as medics. The firefight was brutal and short. Alexei fired his rifle for the first time. When silence fell, his hands shook uncontrollably. He stared at the ground, at the finality of what he'd done. That night, huddled in an abandoned apartment, he called Lena. "I'm alive," he whispered. "Tell Sofia I love her. Tell her I'm fighting for her future." Across town, Maria's group turned the community center into a makeshift aid station. She cleaned wounds with bottled water, her fingers raw. She learned quickly how to stop bleeding, how to calm the terrified. Between bursts of shelling, she handed out bread, batteries, blankets. "We are stronger than they think," she told an old woman trembling in the corner. On February 26, Russian artillery pummeled the city for 30 minutes straight. The ground shook, dust rained from ceilings. Alexei's unit defended the northeastern approaches near Troyeshchina, repelling an armored push toward a power plant. Flames licked the skyline. They held. Maria's district, Obolon, suffered repeated clashes. She spent the night distributing supplies under curfew. "If you see anyone without a blue armband," the guard at the barricade warned, "shoot first." The words chilled her, but she nodded. By February 27, Kyiv was scarred but still standing. Saboteurs roamed, yet the city hadn't fallen. Alexei's unit chased a group near Syrets metro, exchanging fire until dawn. When one comrade fell, Alexei dragged him to safety, blood soaking his gloves. There was no time for grief, only survival. February 28, March 5, the longest week satellite photos revealed a 64-kilometer-long Russian convoy crawling toward Kyiv, an iron serpent on the roads from Belarus. Fear rippled through the city. Yet the days passed, and the convoy stalled in mud and disarray. Hope crept back. Alexei stood watch one night under a brittle moon, the cold biting through his coat. "They thought they'd take us in 3 days," said the sergeant beside him, lighting a cigarette. "They didn't expect us." Alexei nodded, thinking of Lena and Sofia. No one expects the heart of Kyiv. In Obolon, Maria transformed again, teacher turned nurse, nurse turned organizer. She set up a system for children in shelters, makeshift classes where kids could draw, sing, remember laughter. "The world hasn't ended," she told them softly. "It's just paused." When missiles struck the TV tower on March 1, Maria was only a few blocks away. The blast wave threw her to the ground, shattering windows. Smoke billowed into the sky over Babin Yar. She got up, ears ringing, and ran toward the wounded. A man's leg was crushed. She tore her scarf to make a tourniquet. Blood stained her hands again. Kyiv reeled, hospitals overflowed, air raid sirens never stopped, but morale refused to break. On March 3, rumors spread that the massive convoy had stalled indefinitely. "God froze their engines," someone joked grimly. Mid-March, holding the line by mid-March, the battle rhythm became almost normal. Each morning, check the news, count the living, brace for shelling. Alexei's unit shifted west, defending key intersections near Borshchehivka. He had grown leaner, harder. The fear had dulled into focus. One afternoon, he found a stray dog trembling near a ruined grocery store. He shared his ration with it, naming it Ticker, quiet. The animal followed him from then on, a small heartbeat in the ruins. Maria's old school became a shelter for displaced families. She slept in the teacher's lounge, her desk piled with donated clothes. One evening, she found a child's notebook under a desk. On its cover, a drawing of a house, blue and yellow flags waving above it. She traced the lines with her fingers and smiled for the first time in days. On March 14, A missile struck a building in Obolon, shattering windows for blocks. Maria helped carry out the injured, her coat singed, her ears ringing. "We won't leave," she told a crying man clutching his dog. "This is our home." March 2030, the turning tide as March waned, Ukrainian counterattacks began. Makariv retaken, convoys ambushed. The enemy's advance stalled everywhere. Alexei's unit joined the push west, liberating villages near the capital. The countryside was a graveyard of burned tanks and abandoned vehicles. In one ruined house, he found a family's photo album, birthdays, weddings, sunlight. He carried it to the nearest survivor center, whispering, "Someone should remember." Maria's strength faltered briefly. Exhaustion caught her in the chest like a fist. One night she broke down, sobbing quietly in the dark. A fellow volunteer handed her a cup of tea. "Cry now," he said gently. "Tomorrow we rebuild." Then came March 29, Russia announced withdrawal. No one dared believe it. But by April 2, it was true. Kyiv stood free. Smoke still drifted from the outskirts, but the thunder of artillery had ceased. Alexei walked through Podil's familiar streets, now lined with shattered glass. He stopped where his apartment once stood. The windows were blown out, walls pocked with shrapnel, but the photo of Lena and Sofia, pinned to the fridge with a magnet, was still there. He laughed, then cried until his body shook. Maria emerged from her basement shelter to the sound of church bells. People hugged strangers in the streets, waving flags from balconies. "We are still here," she whispered. "We are still Kyiv." Epilogue. After the fire weeks later, the city began to breathe again. Public transport returned. Markets reopened. The scars would take years to heal, but life pulsed stubbornly beneath the rubble. Alexei reunited with Lena and Sofia in a crowded train station. Sofia ran into his arms, her laughter a sound he thought he'd never hear again. "Papa, did you beat the bad guys?" she asked. He smiled through tears. "We all did, my love, every one of us." Maria returned to her classroom in late April. Only half her students came back, the rest scattered across Europe. Still, she began the lesson as always. "Good morning, children." "Good morning, Miss Maria," they replied, shy but smiling. Outside, the spring sun broke through the clouds, warming the battered city. Kyiv had endured siege and fire, and yet it stood not as a monument to war, but to the unyielding spirit of those who refused to kneel. They were the coders and teachers, the mothers and sons, the ones who stayed. They were the defenders of Kyiv.